Emotional addiction and why you can't stop thinking about them. Why is it, even when you know someone isn't right for you, when they've made it abundantly clear that they can't meet you, they don't want the same things, and possibly they never truly saw or valued you, yet a part of you still can't let go? I'm Ben Ufana, and we're just about to dive into it. Before we go further, I do want to mention that I'm going to be reading from this article that I'm completing. And the reason here is simple. The concepts I covered are so deeply layered and require a level of detail that's best captured in writing. And like many authors and academics, I want to make sure that I convey these important points with clarity and precision so nothing meaningful is lost. So, anyway, here we go. Why does your mind keep circling back to them, replaying memories, fantasizing about what could have been, or clinging to the hope that something might change? This is what I refer to as emotional addiction, a term that reflects the very real biochemical, psychological, and somatic patterns that keep us fixated on someone long after the connection has ended, or even when it never really existed. Many people blame themselves for not being able to move on, or even worse, they're plagued by a pervasive sense of self loathing, blaming and resenting themselves for the lack of reciprocation. If I were only prettier or more handsome, if I had a better job or a decent income. Emotional addiction isn't just about willpower or logic. It often stems from a deeply woven pattern of neurochemical imbalances, unhealed attachment wounds, projection, and dissociation from the body. We become bonded to the fantasy, to the emotional roller coaster, and the unresolved pain still lodged in our system. When we fall for someone, especially in an intense or unstable relationship, our brain becomes like a drug fueled rave. Dopamine, the feel good neurotransmitter associated with anticipation and reward, surges in response to every message, glance, or fleeting moment of affection. But it's not just the highs the brain keeps coming back for, it's the entire cycle of anticipation, reward, and withdrawal. The problem arises when the connection becomes erratic, inconsistent, and unreliable, whether it's due to ghosting, emotional unavailability, or intermittent reinforcement. In those moments, cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, floods our system. We become anxious, dysregulated, craving resolution. Then a message or fleeting moment of intimacy comes through, and the dopamine surges again. This hormonal whiplash pulls us into a vicious loop, chasing the high of connection, embracing for the crash of separation. The brain, desperate to resolve the uncertainty, fixates even more intensely on the person, reinforcing the cycle. Oxytocin and vasopressin, chemicals involved in bonding and attachment, further cement the connection. These are released not just during physical intimacy, but also through being open and emotionally vulnerable and making deep eye contact with the other person. Even if the relationship is toxic or inconsistent, the body registers any sense of closeness as attachment. The more time we spend ruminating, replaying memories, stalking their social media, or fantasizing about reunion, the more we reinforce the neural pathways associated with them. This turns them into a psychological trigger, a fixation that feels less like love and more like compulsion. So when a relationship ends or becomes chaotic, the brain doesn't just miss the person, it goes into full-blown withdrawal from the chemical highs and lows we've come to depend on. Psychologist Dorothy Tenoff coined the term limerence to describe the involuntary, all-consuming obsession many experience in the early stages of love or unrequited attachment, where thoughts about another person become intrusive, persistent, and emotionally charged. Limerence can feel euphoric at times, but is ultimately fueled by anxiety, uncertainty, and a craving for reciprocation. It's not real intimacy. It's not love. It's a biochemical and psychological fixation on the fantasy of who someone is and what they could mean for us. Unlike love, which deepens through trust, shared values, and mutual care, limerence often flourishes in inconsistency and unavailability. Many people mistake it for fate or karmic destiny, but it's more akin to emotional hunger than spiritual alignment. People experiencing limerence tend to idealize the other person, seeing only their best qualities. They ruminate endlessly on interactions, imagine future scenarios, or past moments. They feel euphoria when receiving attention, and then they plunge into the absolute depths of despair when ignored, and they lose interest in other aspects of life. Limerence often has less to do with the person themselves and more to do with what they represent: safety, validation, the healing of old emotional wounds, and the hope of finally receiving the love, affection, and appreciation they so desperately long for. The pain of not being chosen or the craving for reciprocation can reignite abandonment trauma from childhood. The obsession becomes a surrogate for something much deeper. Limerence tends to develop in people with attachment wounds, especially those with anxious or disorganized attachment styles. For those who didn't get their emotional needs met consistently in childhood, the unpredictable nature of a push pull connection can mimic the emotional terrain of the early years. It feels familiar, and in that familiarity, the wound seeks resolution. But instead of healing, we find ourselves trapped in a cycle of longing, hope, and devastation, a cycle that often mirrors our early relational trauma rather than genuine intimacy. And while those with significant relational trauma are particularly vulnerable, even those of us without it can find ourselves caught in this relentless pattern, driven by unmet emotional needs and unprocessed pain. Part of what makes emotional addiction so hard to break is that we're rarely relating to the actual person in front of us. We're relating to a projection, an idealized image we've constructed, often unconsciously, that fills the blanks with our deepest hopes, longings, and unmet needs. When we haven't done the work of healing our core wounds, we unconsciously project our unmet needs and unresolved conflicts onto others, constructing illusions of rescue and redemption. We imagine a partner who will finally choose us, validate us, and make us feel whole. That projection becomes magnetic, pulling us deeper into the fantasy. Even when they show us they're unavailable, unkind, or uninterested, we override reality with stories. They're just scared. They're overwhelmed. They'll come back when they're ready. And in doing so, we cling to the hope of healing old wounds through someone who is incapable of meeting those needs. This projection serves a purpose. It shields us from the rawness of abandonment and the deeper void we carry inside. But the longer we cling to the fantasy, the more we avoid the real work of healing. We're not engaging with the person as they are. We're interacting with an illusion sculpted by the distortions of our brain and psyche. And because that illusion is so compelling, we hold on to it, even when reality tells us a completely different story. To further complicate matters, so many of us walk through life dissociated from our bodies and our deeper feelings and our needs. We're ungrounded, not fully present in the here and now. Dissociation often begins for so many of us as a survival strategy, especially for those of us who endured emotional neglect, trauma, or invalidation. It's the body and mind's way of shielding us from the overwhelming emotions we never fully understood or learned to process. When we're dissociated, we become more susceptible to obsessive attachments because we've lost touch with the inner compass that signals when something feels wrong. We override our gut instincts and remain entangled long after a connection has proven emotionally unsafe. We're also disconnected from the authentic core of our being, the part of us that is meant to sustain us with a deep and nourishing source of life force from within. The deeper our wounds and the greater our disconnection from ourselves, the more likely we are to grasp for those who are unavailable, disinterested, hurtful, and abusive. Driven by emotional starvation, we search for someone to make us feel whole, alive, wanted, and loved. But this hunger isn't born from one person's absence. It's the echo of years of trauma and unmet needs. Our deep emotional wounds and unmet needs for safety, mirroring, affection, presence, attunement, and love don't simply disappear. They live on in our psyche, our nervous system, and throughout our physiology. Meanwhile, our bodies hold the backlog of unprocessed pain, the grief, longing, terror, the abandonment we never had the space to feel or express. The pain becomes the silent engine behind our obsessions. We're not just missing them, we're feeling the accumulation of every time we've been dismissed, rejected, or left behind. And unless we engage with the deep level processing of our most deeply wounding experiences and the emotions attached to them, the pain continues to drive us, leading us to fixate, ruminate, and re traumatize ourselves. The individuals we find ourselves so powerfully drawn to, the ones we obsess over, are often reflections of the deeply wounded parts of ourselves. Until these wounds are brought into conscious awareness and healed, they compel us to pursue the kinds of individuals and relationships that are deeply wounding. When we're caught up in emotional addiction, especially in the throes of limerence, we're not truly present to life as it is. We're stuck in the past, clinging to a fantasy, are spinning in cycles of hope and despair. And in that state, we remain unavailable both to ourselves and those who can genuinely love us. The quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. But when we're locked into obsessive patterns, we're unable to create the space for healthier and more secure connections to emerge. We carry the residue of the past into every new interaction. We search for familiarity, even if it's painful, rather than cultivating what is genuinely nourishing. Trauma is not just stored in the mind, it's stored throughout the body. When we experience emotional pain, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, and we lack the understanding or the means to fully process those emotions, they become embedded in our tissues as tension and contraction. The residue of all these undigested emotions also creates a heavy, stagnant presence. Every so often, someone comes along who mirrors these deeply buried emotional wounds. There's something about their personality that stirs the old unresolved pain, echoes of a parent's inconsistency, neglect, emotional unavailability, or even cruelty. Or maybe there's a quality about them that touches our deepest vulnerabilities, reigniting that familiar sense of longing or desperation. These individuals act as mirrors, reflecting back the wounded parts of ourselves that are still crying out for resolution, healing, and to be loved. We get so hooked on these individuals, not because of who they are, but because of what they represent, the possibility of healing these ancient wounds. It's as if a part of us believes that if we can just get it right with them, that we'll finally resolve the pain that's tormented us for years. But since many of us are not doing the deep level processing of our emotions, we get caught up in these reenactments, repeating the same cycles of longing, obsession, and heartbreak, rather than resolving the internal conflicts that drive them. That's why so many of us remain stuck. It's not a matter of willpower, it's a matter of embodied memory. Emotional wounding that isn't thoroughly digested and heals continues to reinforce our holding patterns. The pain stays locked in our tissues, waiting for the next mirror to bring it back to life. When we're not doing the deep level emotional processing through practices like trauma informed meditation, deep tissue bodywork, sessions with gifted healers, or the vision quest, as I've gone on many times, and the kinds of relationships we establish with individuals who could truly love and nurture us, these emotional imprints remain active. They keep feeding the fixation, the longing, and the fantasy of reconnection. Until we do the real work, we keep seeking out mirrors instead of true healing. Healing begins when you stop chasing the person and start turning inwards, when you make the brave decision to feel what you've been avoiding. It starts when you come back to your body and access the emotions you spent a lifetime running from and begin to thoroughly digest them. As I've said so many times, you cannot heal what you don't feel. There is absolutely no way around it. That means slowing down and returning to your body and breathing into the places where the pain still lives. It means thoroughly digesting the backlog of grief, loneliness, abandonment, and longing, not by analyzing it endlessly, but by feeling it fully. You have to feel your way through the grief, the rage, the longing, and at times the overwhelming fears of abandonment. You have to learn to sit with the contraction in your chest, the ache in your gut, the dull pain behind your eyes. You have to not only witness it, but breathe softly and deeply while being fully immersed in the depths of it and let it move. When done consistently, the emotional charge dissipates. You begin to disentangle from the fantasy and dissolve your unhealthy attachments. You start seeing the other person more clearly. This process is most effective and greatly accelerated when combined with the therapeutic interventions I mentioned earlier. As we do this inner work, we reclaim our bandwidth, our life force, and our capacity to love and be loved. As your brain rewires and the wounded parts of your psyche heal, you begin to develop a new, much healthier foundation, one that deepens your connection to your authentic core. As you progress along your journey of healing, meeting more of your needs directly, while incorporating the intensive daily practice and the most effective therapeutic interventions, your brain, body, and psyche gradually stop relying on the fantasy projection you once obsessed over as your sole source of aliveness. The pain of obsessive longing that so many of us find ourselves caught up in is not proof that someone is your soulmate. More often, it's a reflection of the deeply wounded parts of you calling out for healing. You're not weak or defective for struggling to let go. You're not broken for replaying the memories or fantasizing about what could have been. You are simply human, up against a powerful combination of neurochemistry, trauma, projection, and unmet needs. But healing is entirely possible. And the process of healing doesn't just help you to move on from them, it brings you back into connection with your own body, the authentic core that resides deep within, and opens the door to more meaningful and fulfilling connections. When you begin to clear the emotional residue of the past, you create space for a different kind of love, one rooted in safety, presence, reciprocity, and truth. Because real love, the kind that heals rather than harms, doesn't live in chaos. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't leave you wanting at the edge of uncertainty. Real love is steady, grounding, and nourishing. It feels like coming home. The most powerful love you can cultivate first is the one you extend to yourself by facing what hurts, reclaiming what you've lost, and learning to hold yourself with deep and unwavering compassion. From this place of wholeness, you become capable of forming the kind of love that doesn't re traumatize you, but nourishes you at the deepest levels. I want to thank you for joining me. Be sure to look below to click like and subscribe. And if you're caught in the cycle of longing, obsession, and heartbreak, if you find yourself unable to let go of someone who isn't capable of meeting you, know that it's not about willpower. It's about healing the deepest levels of your body, mind, and soul. I work with individuals just like you, ready to break free from emotional addiction, dissolve the fantasy projections that keep you stuck, and reconnect with the authentic core of who you are. Together, we'll address the unprocessed pain and attachment wounds that have kept you bound to unhealthy relationships, creating the space for real love, the kind that nourishes and restores. So, if you're ready to finally break free from the endless loop of emotional addiction and step into the kind of love that heals rather than harms, reach out. Text or call me at 332 333 5155. The path back to yourself and to real love begins here.